Are you guys good to go? Okay, great, awesome. And just as kind of a guidelines and a starting point, if anyone has any questions, don't be afraid to raise your hand. There's a raise your hand button in the Zoom. Donc, il y a une fonction qui marche pour lever les mains. Or you can just say, I have a question. Oh, Leo, I think, has a question. Or Leo, are you just testing out the raising hand?
Oh, I'm testing it.
Oh, you're testing it. Great, awesome. So you're my first example. So yeah, if you guys have questions, just raise your hand or just let me know and say vocally, open your volume and say, I have a question. The first class is really to get you guys familiar with what this class is all about and then give you guys an insight on the types of projects we're going to be doing, okay? So it's a bit of a preview, but also jumping into the first project itself. So, okay, so for graphic design, the main things we're going to be using is we're going to be working with Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign. Okay, and so I think the majority of people here are probably starting from the beginning in graphic design, which is perfect because this class is geared towards those people who are starting from zero. And when we think about graphic design, the reason why I've chosen these 3 programs is because these programs are the basics and the foundations of graphic design. And so Photoshop really talks about images, enhancing images, creating artwork from scratch, and illustrations. And I'll be showing a bunch of examples for that. And so you see here en français, c'est un logiciel qui est pour les photographies numériques ou également créer des images originales. And then the next one is Illustrator, which is another program we'll be diving into, which creates vector images. And these you'll see, if you guys think of logos, a lot of times logos are created with Illustrator. So just to kind of give you an idea. And then the third one is InDesign, which is, again, also from the Adobe family. And this one is to create journals and books and posters and brochures. And so you guys might be thinking, well, okay, that's really cool, but like, what does this all mean? Ça veut dire quoi exactement tous ces programmes, tous ces logiciels? So what it means is, if I show you guys kind of some examples of student projects that we've done in the past, is we have some projects over here that are, let's see here, student projects. So for example, something in Photoshop that you guys will be learning throughout the semester is something basic. First class is, today we're actually going to go through this. We're going to look at creating shapes, okay? So just manipulating color and figuring out how digitally to create shapes and layers and imagery. So this will be our first class. And then as we dive further into the different classes, then we get more complex. So not only are we looking at shapes, les formes, we're also looking at textures and colors and how to layer things. And as you can see, some of these are kind of like more brush strokes, or kind of as if you're painting a photo, and then others are more of a digital shape, right? And so we're going to be playing with shapes, textures, and layers. And then as we go forward into the next couple classes, then we start creating actual imagery with Photoshop. So we start looking at, how do we manipulate sceneries from textures and shapes and make them look kind of, different, or have textures that you don't necessarily see in real life, but you can tell that this is still a landscape image, right? With mountains and with the sun. And you can add a lot of these projects. There's a lot of room for you to customize and design how you would like. And so everyone's project will be a little bit different, but the main theme will always be the same. Okay. From that, right now, I'm just giving everyone an overview. From that, we're going to jump into patterns, creating patterns from scratch. So all of these are what you end up designing. And we're going to look at geometric patterns. We're going to look at repeat patterns. Basically, when we are creating this type of pattern, each of these shapes is drawn separately by the student, and then we just mass produce it. So it means that we just repeat, copy and paste it, but the program does it for you automatically. So that's what's good about software programs like Photoshop or any graphic design programs, is you can rely on the computer to do a lot for you. And so in this course, what's important is that we'll rely on the computer to do a lot for us, but we need to understand the computer first, right? We need to understand the software first. And so as you can see, this is another version of the mountain one. This one looks very different, but the idea and the design theory behind it is the same, okay? And then this one is a really cool pattern. So it doesn't even look like a pattern. It's kind of like an image within a pattern, right? So this student had made, as you can see, kind of a square block here. And then we use the program to repeat to how we liked. So this is kind of, I mean, this, and then these are other personal projects that some of the students have done, you know, kind of tongue-in-cheek, funny ones. This is a Minecraft one, and so forth. So you can kind of see here within the Photoshop section of this course, you will have a few personal projects that you can draw, and I will help you design and draw. And then you will have a few that are, you know, that are within the class and the outline of the class. So that's just kind of overview for Photoshop. Now to give you an overview of Illustrator. So the second program that we're going to talk about is Illustrator. So Illustrator is a program where you draw in vectors. And what this means is that it cannot become bigger or small. If it becomes bigger or smaller, it still looks the same. So the quality is very good with Illustrator, okay? So Illustrator, now you can do some other cool things. Like you can make things look much more 3D. You can create logos with Illustrator that look different than the effects that you can have with Photoshop. And so these are some examples of students in the past that what they've created with Illustrator. You can also create different images of and icons and illustrations of yourself. So Illustrator, the word illustrator is illustrate, right? And what I mean by illustrate is stuff like this. So these are illustrations of people or illustrations like this, and so forth. All right. So there's a lot to play with in Illustrator. You can create 3D images in Illustrator, something like this. Learning how to build 3D from 2D. And there are other things that you can manipulate. So you can put words in objects, apply textures, and you know, make things all from scratch, but have images within images, such as this one. All right. So that was a preview of Illustrator, Photoshop, and Illustrator. Here are some other examples of Photoshop is when we've done an art gallery and we've created an entire series of, it's basically someone has taken one of their three of their projects, and they put, so understanding how to create bigger overall illustrations or designs to also showcase your projects. So that's kind of a preview. And then lastly, the program that I talked about right before this, which was InDesign, the third program we will learn, that one right there. For InDesign, what we're going to do is we are going to take all of your projects from this design course and we're going to create a digital book. And in this digital book, it's also a book you can go to the printer and print. So for example, let's take a look at one of them. So here's a project of one of the students, and they created an entire book out of all the projects, right? So they listed all their projects, and then it lists which program the project used. Different pattern designs they created. This is a gallery of actually all of her projects inside the gallery. Then more of those projects, right? And a little description. Here are some lettering words used in Illustrator, and you can see Illustrator is written here. So it shows which program is used for which project. Here's a 3D version of Shanghai as a project, and then also the car project where the words are embedded or inside a form. Here is a geometric. So this is a geometric animal project that we would do. And so for example, this one you create also in Illustrator, but you can choose any animal of your choice. And we start to understand how to play with dimensions and shadows and geometric shapes. And this is the continuation of that one, just a different style. And then lastly, a illustration of her family and what she completed and why she took the course, right? So this booklet is actually created in, oh, let me just close this. This booklet is actually created in InDesign because InDesign is the software that creates books and brochures and journals and such things, all right? So basically what we'll be working on is all three of these programs, but then at the end, you'll have one major project that includes everything. Okay, so with that being said, what we're gonna do is, in order for you guys to start this course, you will have to download these three programs. So this one is Photoshop, PS is Photoshop, AI is Illustrator, and ID is InDesign. But you can start with, if it's too much, then you can start with just downloading PS. The way you would do it is you would go into Adobe Creative Cloud. This might load a bit. And if you go for students, you can save up to 60%, and it's $20 per month, or you can try the free trial. And if you buy it, it will download, and then you will download the Photoshop program. Okay, so that's how you guys would need to get started. So I'm gonna go ahead, because I already have everything set up. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go into my Photoshop, and I'm going to open our first project, okay? So, all right, so our project, let's see. Project one, I have a bunch of them from previously, so let's open this up and up. Okay, so this is what Photoshop looks like. All right, I hope everyone can see this. So Photoshop, it looks, when you first open it, it's gonna look a little bit scary. If you have a new one, let's say, before I even open this up, if I say new, it's gonna come up like this, okay? So you do File, New, and what I would just do is I would just go to Custom, that's fine, and then it's gonna come out like that, okay? And what we're gonna do is, what I wanna show you guys first is how we created all of this project, right? This first project, because the foundation of Photoshop is that you have to understand layers, okay? And the layers are what is here. So the best way to understand it is that if I start turning things off and on. So for example, see if I turn this black line right here off, that turns off, right? So if I turn this off, then it turns the polygon off. If I turn rectangle off, it turns the rectangle off, and etc. Oh, right? And so how Photoshop works, the best way to explain it is, if you think of it as layers, each of these shapes, this is one layer and this is another layer. If I turn it off, the layer disappears. But if this layer is in front of this layer and I want this layer to be in front of that layer, then I have to go here. And so let's say this is the circle, right? But this circle is behind these two shapes. So then I just move it in front, and the position of where the layer is changes the whole image, changes the design, right? So again, this is all new to you guys, so don't be afraid if this is like a lot of information, but just understand that the main thing with Photoshop, any of these programs, is they all function with layers. And think of layers as pieces of paper that have different shapes on them, and they move with the design. Okay. So what we're going to do today is we're going to create this whole thing from zero. And I'm going to start step by step to show you guys how I would teach this class and how we would go about creating this project. And then we would follow this system for most of our other classes. Okay. And for those people that have signed on later, just to repeat myself and just to let you guys know, if anyone has questions, I'm always open to questions. So feel free to ask me questions anytime by raising your hand or saying you have a question. Okay, and I think, Leo, you're still testing out the hand raising function. So, all right.
No, I have a question.
Oh, you actually have a question? Go ahead, Leo.
Yeah. How do you move the shapes?
How do you move them? Good question.
Yeah.
So when you, let me see if I can minimize you guys. Okay, so for example, when you have this circle here, let's say I'm this circle right here, what you have here is you have a move tool here. And if you want to move it, you have to make sure you select the layer and then you can move it. Okay. And if that's not clear, I'm going to go step by step creating it from zero. So I will show you as we're making it how to move it. But basically all of this section over here is your toolbar. So all of the functions that you want to use on the shapes can be found here. And one of them is the move tool. So this is moved. If I want to move, let's say this rectangle here, I have to select the rectangle on the layers and then make sure move is selected and then I move it. Is that clear?
Yes.
Yeah? Cool. Good question. Awesome. So, okay. So let's get started from scratch on how we would create this. All right. So I'm going to put this here as reference so I know what it should look like. I'm going to go to File. Okay. To start any document, you got to go to File, New, right? So then, and then I'm going to go to New. It's going to give me this huge board. Okay. Don't get scared. It's totally fine. What you're going to do is you're going to go to something easy like print, because it's going to give you a typical size, so you don't have to think about it. You're going to go to letter and just change the orientation. So orientation is how a paper sits, right? So right now it's like this. I want to change it to this. So it's portrait and landscape. I'm going to change it to landscape. Boom. Okay, so I'm going to go to create. It's going to give me a white piece of paper digitally, right? So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to double click. I'm going to unlock the background. Okay, just unlock, do okay. And now I'm going to take a look at what all these shapes are. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's close. I'm going to, if you guys use this side here, if you look at right here, it's an eye symbol. So it just means to hide or unhide something. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the rainbow background just because I want to see what is the basic shapes, right? Okay, so let's take a look at the shapes. There's an orange rectangle and a circle and then some kind of like diamond shape over here, right? So, okay, so let's create the orange rectangle first. All right, so what I do now is I have to first make sure there's a background that's white. So I'm going to call this, rename it. I'm going to double click. So just click twice, call it background. Okay. Then I'm going to make a new layer and I'm going to call it, when you make a new layer, you click right here, which is it's a plus sign. And I'm going to call it rectangle orange. Okay. You can kind of call it any name you want, but for me, I can memorize it better that way. Okay. So rectangle orange. All right. Now this one is selected. So I'm going to go to my shape here, which is right under the move tool. It's the second tool. Okay. There's two ways of creating shapes. I'm going to show you one way and then I'll show you another way. So the first way is you use this Marquee tool. Okay. So when you click on it, it's going to show that. If you right click on it with your mouse, it's going to show you all the other options. And with any tools in here on Photoshop, on any of the programs, when you click left, it's going to hit the tool. When you click right, it's going to give you other family options. Okay, so I'm going to click the rectangle marquee tool. Then I'm going to draw this rectangle about there. Okay, so you see now it's dashed in. Now I want to change, but right now it's not giving me anything because there's no color, right? So what I need to do is I need to go to my color palette, which is right here, and I need to change it. I double click, so click twice here, and I'm going to select, let me see what kind of color it is. I think it was like an orange. Oh, I think it's probably more yellow actually. Let's do a yellow. It doesn't really matter. Do okay. Now I have the color selected, but I haven't painted it yet, right? So what you can do is you go to our paint bucket tool right here, and then you paint it, okay? And then you click move, and then you do Control D, which is a shortcut, and it unselects it. And now you have a rectangle, right? So, and then you just repeat the same process. It's a multi-step process, but once you start repeating, it will become very easy to you, okay? So, okay, so let's take a look. Let's look at what other shape is, what's under the rectangle, right? There's this like circle and then diamond shape. Okay, so we're gonna create a new layer. First step is make a new layer, call it circle blue, let's say, okay? We're gonna go to our marquee tool, but we're gonna, instead of right click, instead of left click, we're gonna right click, right? So we're gonna right click and we're gonna go to the ellipse marquee tool. And then I'm gonna just draw a circle, okay? And you can make sure that your mouse is on the right layer. And then we just go to we have to color the circle in, right? So we double click left on the color, go to the color, maybe about there, okay? Doesn't need to be exact same color. Go to a blue you like, then go to your paint bucket tool, and then you do Control D, and it unselects it, okay? So now if you want to move it, you can also move it like this, because why? Because my layer circle blue is selected and my move button is selected, okay? But there's a little bit of a problem, right? Because our circle here is behind, our circle right now is like this, but it needs to be behind the shape, right? So how we do that, very simple. We just take that and we just drag it out. Voila, okay? And then there we go. Now you can kind of see the order of things. So the next one is we want to do a diamond, right? So, okay, diamond, create new. And now I'm just going to put my layer in the right spot right away because I know that the diamond is behind both the rectangle and the circle. You can always switch the position after, but it just makes my life easier. Okay, I'll just call it diamond and then yellow. Again, these names you guys can come up with on your own, or even in the colors. The important thing is that you name them so it doesn't say layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, and then when you have a bunch of shapes, you don't know what is what, and you get confused, right? So, okay, so now we have a diamond we need to create, but there is not really a diamond shape, right? Because if you look here, there's no diamond shape, right? So if you want to create a custom shape, you go to the next tool, which is called, click on it, Polygonal Lasso tool, okay? So you're gonna click on it and then you're gonna right click. So you see this family tab and you're gonna click Polygonal Lasso tool here, okay? And I'm gonna just make sure the color I want is selected early, maybe like a yellow. Then you're just gonna click, 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 and then it highlights a shape for you, right? Then we just do the same thing. Select, there you go, Control D. Control D is the shortcut. Just as before we move forward, just as a note, is that all the shortcuts I will be sending to you guys in a PDF, so you'll have a reference to know what shortcuts to use. So don't worry about like what shortcut is what right now, you'll have a piece of paper that tells you all the most important shortcuts. Okay. All right, so now, perfect. So now this is behind here. This is second layer, this is top layer. Now we're just missing this one right here, right? So, okay, so let's make that black line and then we can kind of move on. So, okay, so let's create a new layer. Let's call it black line left, just to give it a name. I'm gonna put him on top because as you can see in the layers and in the sequence of layers, that one's on the top, right? Perfect. And we can just go and make a black line is pretty much a thin rectangle, right? So understanding how to use those certain tools, now you can just create a rectangle. Oops, that didn't quite make it to the end of the page. So I'm just gonna do this, okay? And then I'm just gonna make it black, right? Because we want it black. So just pull your color down to the corner. Then do your paintbrush tool, move, Control D to deselect. And there we go. Now we have a line, okay? If I think this line is a little bit too thick, what you can do, again, a shortcut, and then we will send this in a document. Is that you do Control T. What that does is it selects your image to size it to what you want. So it changes the proportions of the image, right? If I do this, if I hold Shift, I want to make it thinner. So it's going to do that. Okay. All right. So here is the thin line now. So again, Control T, Control D is to deselect to get out of it being highlighted. Control T is to transform, change the shape and size. Okay. So I just transformed it to what I like. All right. Very important point. Now is that all of these shapes here, you can kind of see in the original image, right? You have kind of a left side and a right side. So what we want to do is we want to organize it really well so that we can turn one side off rather than all of these off singularly. So what you can do is from your layers, you can actually make a folder called a group. And the group looks like a folder. So it's right here. Okay. So if I were to make a group and I just, now you see it's group one and it says, let's say left side shapes. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select here until here. So you can select each of them, hold Shift and select all of them, or you can just do top one, Shift and go down. And then I'm going to drag them all into here. And you see they kind of indent. So what that means is now all my shapes turn on and off like this. Okay. So why am I showing you guys all of this, right? Because we're just in design class, right? Why do we have to organize everything in folders and, oh, it's so much work? Well, the reason is because in design, you're going to have so many elements, and the most actually fundamental part of design is organization of your shapes, your forms, your letters, and everything else. So the behind the scenes, the things that you don't see in design, sometimes are the most important. So what we're going to learn here in this class that's very important is the best practices and the things that you need to know to have a good foundation. Okay. So, all right. So great. We have all of these saved. This is here. Now let's make a right side shape. Okay. So now let's make a new layer. Same thing. And we're going to make this side. We're going to make a circle, a polygon, and then a rectangle with a thinner line. Okay. So I just made a new layer. Great. Done. Oh, I already forgot what they look like. So we're going to make we're going to make the rectangle. Okay. So let's call this rectangle smaller. That's fine. And this time, remember I said there was two ways to make shapes, right? There's no wrong way or right way. There's just two different ways. So then instead of using this tool up here called the Marquee tool, what we're going to use is we're going to use the shape tool, which is down here. Okay. And the first image of the shape tool you'll see is usually a rectangle. So we're going to use that tool. And the thing with the shape tool is you have to choose the color first, right? So what I'm going to do is let's say I want the same color as our previous image. I'm going to go here. And again, I will have this in a document for all of you, so I will help you remember. But I'm going to go here to the eyedropper tool. The eyedropper is going to select the color because in the shapes, you have to have the right color first. You can't really change the color after. So you select it. Then I go to my shape, make sure I'm on the right layer, and I just draw a rectangle. Up, et voila. Okay. And also you can move this rectangle, right? Because I'm on the move tool and I'm on the rectangle layer. All right. So now I'm going to draw the rest of those shapes. So a rectangle, I have a circle, and I have this polygon. Okay, so maybe I move this rectangle here. I do Control T because I want to make it a little bit bigger. Maybe I want to make it a little bit longer and thinner. There we go. Okay. Now let's make the circle. So I'm going to do circle. I'll just call this circle 2 because I can't remember which one was bigger. I think this one is bigger, so this is probably bigger. Okay. Now remember, if we use the shape tool, we have to select the color first. So we're going to go to our eyedropper here. And if you guys really take a close look at these shapes, they'll kind of tell you what they are. So just kind of think about what the image means of the shape or of the icon. Okay. So we're going to select our eyedropper. I'm going to select that guy. Everything changes around me. Perfect. Now we're going to go to our shape tool. We're going to go to ellipse, which is basically a circle. And we'll select it, and then you're just going to make a circle. And I think the circle is a little bit high, so we're gonna go to move tool, and we're gonna put him down here, okay? And then if we wanna change the size, we go to Control T, and we change the size like that, okay? And I think that one is behind the rectangle, right? So let's move it behind the rectangle. And then the last shape is, it's probably right there. The last shape is a polygon, right? So a new polygon. Okay. And we're gonna go to, let's say I want a different color now, completely different color. So let's just go to orange, something like that. And we go to our shape and we go to polygon. And we make the polygon, right? So there you go. So here's the polygon, and we just place it here. Okay, something like that. Let's say I like that. So if we revisit our first image, we can see here that we're actually just missing one last shape in the right side, which is this thin line, right? So, okay, all right, so let's go back to creating a line. So you can actually just use the line tool here. Okay, so we're gonna go to add new layer, which is right here, bottom. Always make a layer for every shape that is separate. Because if you don't make a layer, and let's say, I'll show you what happens if you don't make a new layer. So let me just delete this 1 second. Let's say this is your polygon layer, right? Let's say I just draw another shape on that polygon layer, okay? So let's say I just draw another rectangle and bam, there's a rectangle, okay? What's gonna happen is that if I try to move this polygon, oops. Oh, and this one, actually the shape's made a new layer naturally, so it's fine. But let's see, yes, let's say I'm a polygon and I go to this here and I make a rectangle. Oops. Oh, this is rasterized. Okay. So what happens sometimes is that if you make a shape on the same layer as the previous ones, it's going to move 2 objects at once. So unless you want those objects, you for sure want those 2 objects together, you should probably make separate layers so you have more control. Okay. I can show you with the previous example. With the shapes, you're actually safe because it automatically puts it on its own layer. So you're actually good. Okay. So, okay, so we have this polygon, and the last thing I want to do is I want to make a line. So let's just test that. I can make a line, right? And let's just add a stroke to it. So maybe about like here. Okay, so this one is a little bit thin. So I actually probably would use the previous version. So I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to go back to here and use the rectangle tool. Okay, so I'm going to add a new layer, call this line 2, and we're just going to drop this down. Make sure, go to your colors, turn it black. Oh, what is going on? Sometimes it is not coloring in. So if it doesn't color in, you can always use a brush tool here and just color black. That's another way. Okay, so you can go between your paintbrush and your brush tool. I just colored that. So then Control D to deselect. Okay, let me just make it thinner. Oops. Like that. Okay, and there we go. There we have our line over here, right? And obviously the sizes are a little bit different. That's okay. The point is that we are making the shapes and understanding how each layer talks to each shape, right? So, okay, so now we have all of these and we want to group them in one folder so all of your right side shapes are together, okay? So we're gonna go to our group again, and we're gonna go to our folder here, which is gonna give us group 1. Double click to rename it and call it right side shapes. Okay. And then how we work with that, let me just make this a little bit smaller. How we work with that is I select, hold shift, select all of those layers. Oops, let's do that again. There we go. And then drag him in here, right? So now it indents it. And how you know it worked is you close the folder, which you close the group, and you click the eye tool and you turn it on and off to test that all of them are in the right group. Okay, so you got your right side and your left side. All right, so any questions at this point? Is everyone okay? All right. Okay, so our background is looking a little bit white, right? The original image, if you guys remember, had this background, this gradient background. So I'm going to show you some shortcuts and also some ways of making different backgrounds, okay? And I just noticed something before I kept going is if it says untitled here, that means that it's not saved. So I cannot tell you guys how many, and girls, how many students have made projects, forgot to save it from the beginning, and then their computer crashed. And then they lost everything and they had to do the project over again. So the best thing to do always when you first start a project, which I didn't do in this case, but to just put as a reminder for everyone, is when you first start a project, always go to File, New, and then go to File, Save As, okay? And then you're gonna save it to your computer. And in this case, I'll just save it in class 1 and I'll just call it project. You can name it what you want. For me, I have so many versions of this. So project 1.4 at this point. And you do okay, and you do okay, and then it's done, okay? And then just keep saving, because what happens with these larger software programs for design is that sometimes it will crash because there's too many images, because it takes time to process images. So just get in the habit of saving. All right. Okay, so let's create a background. So there's a few ways to do this. One background we can do is we can drag in an image from the internet. Okay, so how we do that, pretty simple, is that we'll go to the internet and I'll go to like Google, for example, and I'll search rainbow background, right? And just to kind of show you guys a few tools in Google that designers often use is if you go search images in Google, you go to tools, what's going to do is going to show you all of what we call the parameters or parameters that you would use to find an image. So you can actually select the size. So let's say I do size is large. Large usually means higher quality. That's why. You can even select the color and you can select the type of image. Okay. So in this case, I'll just select large so I get a better quality. And let's try dragging in a different style of gradient. Maybe we'll drag in this one, okay? So we just do like any thing, you just save as, don't do copy, just do save as, and you will, oh, there you go. So let's do rainbow 2. Look down here, the types of images you can bring into Photoshop are called JPEG or PNG. So those are the two recommended file types. So I'm just going to save it, enregistrer. And then I'm going to do file, open, and I'm going to bring that rainbow image in. And by bringing it in, all I have to do is just drag it in. Oh, that did not work. So we'll just click it then. Okay. So let's see. Now it's going to load. And as you can see, because it's a larger image, it seemed to have, it loaded in its own tab, which is okay. I'm going to show you how to take it and put it into your own. So what you can do here is you can go to the crop tool, because I don't want this bottom, right? So I'm going to go to crop tool, and before you can edit it, make sure again to double click background so it unlocks, so you can change it. Then after it unlocks, you go to crop tool. We're going to drag this guy here, enter, okay, call this background, name it. And then to take it from this tab, this project to this project, all you have to do is hold it, drag, drop. It's tiny here, that's fine. We're going to put him here, Control T, and just drag him out to where you want it. And if it's too pixelated, then we can get another one. But for now, this should be okay. Okay. So you see how because he's behind, or this layer is behind these two groups, it's staying behind it as the background, right? So that's one way of making it. Another way to do it more manually, and then I'm just going to file save so that nothing crashes. All right, then another way of doing it more manually is we can actually create a gradient from scratch, right? So I'm gonna hide him for a second. So I'm gonna turn off the eye button, create a new layer, and we're gonna call it background 2, okay? Voila, okay. So we have background 2, and what we wanna do is we want to put a gradient and do something custom. So what we can actually do is go to our shape, and we're going to make actually just a second here. We're going to make a background. Okay, so I'm going to start it off with a color, maybe like blue or something like that. And let's just make a rectangle, okay? So as you can see, this is just a dark rectangle, that's fine. And what we wanna do now is once I made that rectangle, if you go into the color properties, you'll see that there's this tab called gradients, right? So you can actually select a bunch of these gradients that have already been pre-made based on the different colors. So it didn't really matter what color I started off my my image with as a background, because all of these are preset, which means already in the program, and you can just go and use what they've already made. And a lot of times they work really well because the program has already thought of all the versions of colors and gradients that work well together. And usually in design, what you would like to do is if you make a gradient with shapes in front, you want the gradient to be a secondary object to the shapes, because the shapes are the most important, right? So you usually want something lighter, you don't want the gradient to compete with your front shapes. So this one kind of competes a little bit because the yellow looks off, but something like this maybe, or that's kind of cool. I mean, it really depends. I mean, even something like this, because the colors are so different from the shapes, right? So But as you can see, colors are the fundamental, basically the fundamental step to design, because they will change your image and they will change your design. They will change your logos completely. So even changing it from this to that, it's a completely different look, right? This shows it's a little bit more dreary. It's a little bit more darker. And something like this feels younger and more spring-like. You know, if you go for the reds, it's like an intense color. It gives you an intense feeling. Maybe this is more summer colors. So understanding how colors play a role by playing with the gradients is actually really helpful to start to understand the fundamentals of design and understand the fundamentals of what we call in design. There's two terms for it, which both kind of mean the same thing, is color theory or chromatic. So basically both of these talk about how colors can actually change your emotional response to seeing an image because they're so different, right? So, all right, there's too much choice for me. So I'm gonna just go ahead and I'm gonna choose one. Let's say I go with this, okay? This is kind of a safer option, okay, great. So there we have it. So now you have a background, right? And you have another background that we've created by dragging it off the internet. Totally fine, okay? And what you can also play around with is if you select the background colors, there's the opacity, which means that you can change the how much of it you see based on the percentage, right? So let's say I do like this one, but I think it's a little bit too intense. Well, then I can just change the opacity so that it gets lighter and smoother, okay? Just file save. So in that, basically, you see how I've changed the opacity to about 50%? It's almost kind of like that one now. I've completely changed what the original image looks like, and it almost mimics this one now, right? So understanding that in design programs and softwares, a lot of the times the image you start with, if you know all of the tools, it could actually look completely different. But we have to learn the tools first, right? So yeah, so that's just kind of a neat way to show you, you don't really know how it started, but you can manipulate it to whatever you like, which is really cool. Okay. All right. So I'm going to save that. Do we have any questions at this point? Is everyone good? Leo, you don't have any questions?
No.
All right, cool. Okay, so that's kind of the first project for Photoshop. It's very simple, but it's just to understand slowly this box over here, which is called the toolbox to the left. The toolbox is basically your best friend because it helps you manipulate, it helps you customize, and it helps you change anything that you want in your design. And then the layers function over here, which basically is the skeleton to your whole design project. So if you don't have the layers set up properly, then it's like a human being, right? If your bones are not strong, then you might look okay sitting down or whatnot, but you can't really move. So these layers help you make a stronger project and a stronger design, and it's really important to understand how to organize them. All right. So, okay, so let me just close this and let me go through, some of the theory part of design. So with this class, each class, how it's going to be structured is that you're going to learn a project, and I'm going to show you guys and teach you guys a project each class. But we will also have design theory, which I'm going to talk to you guys about the foundations of how designs should be set up, how softwares should be set up, and why we do certain things in design, the rules of color, the rules of form, shape, volume, space, etc. So it's not just, when you're creating something, you're not just making it because it looks pretty, right? A lot of things are pretty, but there's also a reason behind why you make it. So we're going to learn about the theory part of it. And what that also does, it helps you describe your design. So if, you know, someone asks you, oh, can you talk to me about this poster you made, or this logo, or this video even that you made? Video graphics also use design, right? You can talk about why you've done those things because you understand the theory behind it, okay? And we're also going to go into design tricks and shortcuts. So I know it might have seemed a lot of information at once when I first went into, okay, do this Command T, Command D to deselect. But just to give you guys an example, how the class is going to be set up is that every class, I'm going to have a class outline that I send to you before class that's going to show all of the shortcuts. And you can always have a reference to those shortcuts when you're listening to the class. So what I would suggest is opening that class outline before I start class and just looking at the bulletin points and seeing what I'm talking about in class. And so let's see if I can pull one up here. Some of them are missing. Let's see here. Oh yeah, so for example, let's say something like this, class 4. So as you can see, here I've listed all of the shortcuts and what they mean, right? So when I'm going through class, you guys will have a document like this with all of the shortcuts that I will be talking about, and then you'll have the definition of them. And so it'll be very clear when I say Control T is transform, but Control T is transform. And as you can see, I've also listed, depending on if you guys have a PC or a Mac, because the shortcuts will change for different types of computers. But the PC version is usually the command and the control are the equivalents. So the PC will be this, and the Mac will be this, and the definition in English and French will be here. Okay, so that will help you guys. The whole goal of this is I want you guys to learn these shortcuts because it will make your life so much easier. And the best way to do it is to watch the projects and watch me design it, and then you guys are slowly learning it. Because if you were just to learn this right now, this would be super boring and you would fall asleep. So the best way is to just, as you're designing, start applying the shortcuts and just use them as you're going forward with the project. Okay. Let's see, what else? So then the fun part, or not so fun part, this depending on who you are, is with each of these software programs at the end, we will have quizzes every class, but we will have one test per each software program. It's a 20-question test. I will give it over video, and you guys will email me the answers right after. But for each of these programs, there will be one test, and you will be graded on it to further and make sure you understand what each of these programs function. Okay, and don't worry if, again, I'm very open to questions. So if there's any questions about things before the test, make sure to ask me and just note it down, and you should be able to do pretty well on these tests. And then, yeah, and then lastly, after that is just our final project. So our final project, as you can see here, that I've showed you is that booklet, right? So to kind of show you guys a few more examples is, let's see, some projects. If there's any here, final books. So a few other examples, maybe like here is, this is another book. You can see this is their shapes project. And again, they made different shapes, but the whole goal is the same. The project doesn't have to look exactly like what I've made. This is like a texture and leaf version. This is the mountain project, but instead they made waves, right? The whole point is to use the tools, but you can make what you prefer. This is a pattern one, which is that cool kind of image, but then within a pattern. This is basically all of those 4 projects you saw in an art gallery that they made all from scratch, and the projects within the gallery to show off the previous projects. And then we get into, and then this is another one. And then we get into Illustrator. So this is Illustrator, right? As you can see, different version of the same project, but their style. So every student can show their personality and also work towards projects they have interest in, but using the tools that we are learning. This one is like kind of an illustration of a building with landscape and with birds. And you're going to learn how to do shadows and effects. This is all effects and textures. This one is kind of going the logo route of looking at letters and manipulating letters. This is the 3D version of the cities, and we'll be using that in Illustrator as well. And then this one is icons and using vectors to create animal shapes. So there's this one here, and then there is this polygonal version, or the geometric version we saw of the earlier one as well. So it says polygonal there. This is another version of the polygonal. You're literally, if you look at it, this and this are the same, but by applying different effects, it changes it completely, right? And this one gives you a different emotional response compared to this one. This one's more flat. This is what we call flat or matte. And then this one, it gives you more of like a spotlight response, or just that it's a highlight on the, it makes it almost look 3D in a sense. This is 3D lettering that we're just having fun and playing around with, but also understanding how to create spines in lettering. And this is more lettering to see how to play with those kind of effects. And then this is an illustration of his brother and their dog. And then their dog, and you can also add real photos with illustrations together. I think you see that a lot in video design as well, this kind of imagery. So there we have it. Those are kind of just some examples of how the class is going to be structured. How the class is going to be structured and what to expect for this class and different projects that you guys will be doing. Now, you are probably previewing this class right now, just wondering, you know, if this is a fit for you, or what can you do with this class, or what can you do with graphic design? So I'm pretty sure if you speak to any kind of designers, whether they're 2D or 3D designers, a lot of the design theory behind it is the same. As designers, as creatives, we use from either it's graphic design, architecture, product design, video design. A lot of the things are common between us. So in this class, you're going to learn the foundations of design theory in general. You're going to learn the foundations of graphic design. If you guys are looking to make a logo or posters or illustrations or advertisements, this is really helpful. If you guys are looking to make websites, this is really very helpful. If you are also looking to make any digital art or video graphics, these design classes are helpful because you can make like little cartoon characters or, you know, such things for videos as well, or even templates for videos. And presentations also for work are very helpful for graphic designs, or graphic design is very helpful for templates and work. So all of these things use design, and all of these things we will be covering in one way or another, or you can feel free to ask me during the course. So for this class, there will be 10, I believe there will be 10 classes for each software. And by the end of it, you will know all 3 of these over here. Okay, Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign. If you guys have questions, let me know. And I think the classes we will have starting this Sunday. So that is pretty much, we'll be jumping into the second project. But that is pretty much what I have for our first class preview. And if anyone has questions, feel free to let me know now.